In the wake of Nina Turner's defeat to Shontel Brown in the special election in Ohio, Hakeem Jeffries has taken a stand to declare that the Democratic base is pro-establishment. And he also declares that the anti-establishment line of attack is quote-unquote lame. I have an article from The Hill that details the following. Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York, a member of the House Democratic leadership, pointed to a win this week by Shontel Brown in a special primary election for an Ohio congressional seat as evidence that voters have no appetite for attacks on establishment Democrats ahead of next year's midterm elections. The extreme left, and this is him saying this, and I quote, "The extreme left is obsessed with talking trash about mainstream Democrats on Twitter, when the majority of the electorate constitute mainstream Democrats at the polls," Jeffries told the New York Times. In the post-Trump era, the anti-establishment line of attack is lame when President Biden and Democratic legislators are delivering millions of good-paying jobs, the fastest-growing economy in 40 years, and a massive child tax cut. Brown, a council member and local Democratic Party chair, had received support from establishment Democrats in Washington, including Representative James Clyburn. I was going to stay right here in South Carolina, minding my business until I got called stupid. Clyburn told Axios this week of his decision to back Shontel Brown. So basically what that means right there, James Clyburn is backing Shontel Brown because Killer Mike, who endorsed Nina Turner, called him stupid for endorsing Joe Biden to be the president without, extracting any kind of concessions, which is, completely accurate to do. He's a dumbass. But he got upset, he got in his feelings, and he supported Shontel Brown, but he was going to support her anyway because he's a corrupt corporate Democrat. Allow me to continue. Brown defeated progressive Nina Turner on Tuesday in a special Democratic primary election to replace former Representative Marcia Fudge, whom President Biden tapped for a cabinet post. Turner, a former spokesperson for Senator Sanders' presidential campaign, and had been backed by leading members of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Jeffries said Brown's win should provide a sobering, get this, Shontel Brown's win to Hakeem Jeffries should provide a sobering message to progressives, sober up progressives, looking to challenge the party's status quo moving forward. Let me put it this way, he says. The majority of Democratic voters recognize that Trumpism and the radical right is the real enemy, not us, Jeffrey said. Apparently, the extreme left hasn't figured that out. Wow. This is amazing. This truly is amazing. I was kind of upset. I was kind of mad when I read this at first, but now it's just hilarious. This guy is completely delusional, isn't he? Do you realize that if Nancy Pelosi somehow, I don't know, if she's no longer the Speaker of the House, this guy's next in line. The guy that just said all this shit is next in line, have there be no more Nancy Pelosi. What a bleak future for anybody that considers themselves on the left. Jesus fucking Christ. And to refer to the left, which is the actual left, as the extreme left. We really need to have a conversation about what's extreme and what's not extreme. You see, America as a country, the Overton window is shifted so far to the right. Saying that you want universal health care, which he's against, is extreme. Saying that you want free college, which is something that many other industrialized countries have, is extreme. Saying that you want to end the wars and the atrocities that we're committing is extreme. Saying those things to Hakeem Jeffries is apparently anti-establishment, and the people don't want that. Well, I have news for you. The polls suggest otherwise. But that's really all the polls do. The polls don't tell you how people will vote once they get in the booth. The polls don't tell you how people feel as it pertains to party loyalty. And I'll get into that subject of party loyalty in just a minute, because it's a subject that I've kind of ignored up until now. But seeing Nina Turner's defeat at the hands of the corporatist Shontel Brown, that subject in my mind is much more important than I previously thought that it was. Now, before I really get into his comments, I love how he just Not that he fails to mention it, he just doesn't mention it. The pouring of money by these corporate donors, these lobbyists, to Shontel Brown's campaign at the last minute. Just completely ignores that. No, the people voted for Shontel Brown because they're pro-establishment. Not because the DMFI donated almost $2 million to her campaign against Nina Turner. Nah. Not because the Republican supporting and donating Robert Kraft donated to her campaign. Not because other Republican donors, corporate donors and what have you, donated to her campaign. No, none of these special interests. No. We're not going to mention them. We're not going to mention the fact that they basically bought the seat. Nah. They voted Shontel Brown in because the people, they don't like the anti-establishment attacks, especially after the Trump era, he says. I got news for you, Mr. Jeffries. It doesn't matter what the fuck era it is. Trump era, Obama era, Bill Clinton, Lyndon B. Johnson. Anti-establishment attacks are what they are. People are fed up with the incrementalism and neoliberal doctrine. So they're going to say bad things about the establishment because the establishment is against the will of the people. They don't serve the people. They serve their corporate interest. And I love how he brings up, and this is how he views the left. This is how Democratic leadership, how Nancy Pelosi and her thugs view the left. The extreme left is obsessed with talking trash about mainstream Democrats on Twitter. He just thinks you're a bunch of Twitter trolls, Hakeem Jeffrey does. You're not real people with actual concerns and plights about the government that's supposed to serve you, but instead they're serving corporate interest. You're just a bunch of idiots on Twitter tweeting bad things at him. He's annoyed by you. I didn't say it, he did. These are his words. That's what he thinks of the quote-unquote extreme left. You're extreme for wanting health care. You're extreme for wanting a living wage. You're extreme for wanting to legalize marijuana and drugs in general. You're extreme for being pro-freedom. You're extreme for being anti-censorship. That makes you extreme to Mr. Jeffries here. He says, when the majority of the electorate constitute mainstream Democrats at the polls. So he's saying that, the majority of Democrats, the majority of Democrat voters more than likely vote for the mainstream Democrats. And basically, he's saying mainstream Democrats. He means corporate Democrats. People like him, people that accept a lot of corporate money and advocate for certain legislation based upon what the special interests tell him to do. Right? That's what he means. And I mean, on that point, he's kind of correct. It's true. And it's difficult to admit, but Democratic voters, when they go to the polls, they do often vote for the corporate candidate. But there's a reason for that. There's reason for all of this, but he just pretends like there's this innate thing within every Democratic voter where they go, oh, I got to vote for the corporate guy because he wants best for me. No, they don't. And a lot of times these people, they most likely know that they don't. I'll give you two reasons, only two, why a Democratic voter may vote for the corporate candidate. Number one, they're afraid. They're afraid to take a chance on somebody that's a little bit more, quote unquote, outlandish, for lack of a better term. They're afraid to take a chance on somebody that's advocating for big change. We know that older voters in this country are adverse to big change. They, kind of like the incrementalism. As long as you're not a Republican, then they're pretty okay with you. So, okay, on that point, he kind of has a point. But there's also a second side to it. A lot of these voters have just been propagandized to fucking back. They're watching MSNBC and CNN all day. They're watching these corrupted business networks that's telling them that the people of this country don't deserve a living wage. They're making lies and being, deficit hawks and all this nonsense. And they're watching this propaganda and they only talk within a certain window and they put certain emphasis on things. And they essentially give you this wiring to where you only think that a certain amount of things are possible and that we don't have certain things because it's simply not possible, or it's not quote unquote profitable, or we don't have the money to pay for it, or whatever type of bullshit mainstream media tells the people that still watch it nowadays. It's absolutely ridiculous. And on the subject of party loyalty, yes, that is becoming an ever so increasingly bigger problem in this society. And I think that a lot of it, and look, this has been exacerbated for many different reasons, but I personally believe that a lot of it has to do with the most recent president, not being Joe Biden, but being Donald Trump. After the Trump regime and during the Trump regime, I do believe that a lot of Democrats, especially institutional Democrats, but Democratic voters, they became more clingy to the name Democrat. And that vote blue no matter who thing, it resonates with a lot of Democratic voters, especially Democratic voters in the suburbs, older Democratic voters. Those types of people. It really resonates with them, where you have this identity over ideology. In my opinion, that's a very, very scary way of going about politics, when you put identity over ideology, when identity precedes ideology, to quote New York University professor Kwame Anthony Appiah. And so you have these party loyalists, aka Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, and the rest. And you have supposed leaders of the left, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Cori Bush, and others, who do good things every now and again. They largely let us down, as we've seen. But when they deviate from the quote unquote party line, they get decimated by the leadership. They get attacked, they get smeared, not just by the leadership, but by the media, because they're all in this together. It's a cabal of corruptness, essentially. And to discuss his line, that last line he had to say, let me put it this way. The majority of Democratic voters recognize that Trumpism and the radical right is the real enemy, not us. No, you are the real enemy, Hakeem. You are. You and all the other corporate shills that are scattered throughout Congress. No, the real fight is the workers versus the owner class, the business class, the people that make the most money, the corrupted politicians, aka you, and all of the other cronies that exist within Washington. You are the enemy, Hakeem. And I admit, we have to do a better job of educating the people so that they can realize that, because obviously some of them don't. And that's indicative of the special election that we just witnessed in Ohio. But he says that the anti-establishment thing is lame. The extreme lefty should stop attacking establishment candidates because it's not working. I have news for you. That's not true at all. That's not true. And it won't stop. And he says this is supposed to sober up the extreme left. If anything, Nina Turner's defeat, in my opinion, should invigorate what he calls the extreme left. It should invigorate you, because that seat was bought. And that should invigorate you to want to get money out of politics and to change the system, to change the way we do things. This guy, words can't describe my disdain for this guy. The way he thinks about life, the way he thinks about politics, it's so despicable to me. I can't find many other words to describe it. But this is who Nancy Pelosi's quote unquote replacement would be. I really don't like this guy.